if you've dismissed Pinterest as a tool or a social channel for your brand, I would ask you to think again.
Pinterest was relatively new and it solved a problem that I wanted. I went viral. To this day, one of the biggest Pinterest users in the world pinned one of my DIY projects. So I went from getting about 300 to 500 visitors a day to my blog to 15,000 in less than a 24-hour time period. We sometimes think like, well, Pinterest is just like recipes and baby shower planning. But the thing is that especially in the business space or in particular niches or industries, your competitor is not using Pinterest. How to start a business has between 500,000 and 1 million searches a month on Pinterest alone.
Welcome to Embracing Marketing Mistakes, the only podcast for senior marketing professionals that celebrates the biggest mistakes and fails, helping you learn practical lessons from other people's misfortune. Also, you can double your return on investment and achieve record revenue. So if you've dismissed Pinterest as a tool or a social channel for your brand, I would ask you to think again, because Megan lays out some really great productivity hacks and tips on how you can get the most of it for your brand in 2024. This is well worth a listen. So, as always, sit back, relax, and take a listen to this about how you can get the most from Pinterest for your brand in 2024. Okay, Megan, well, welcome to the show. So we've invited you on the show because you've got, I found you online and I just saw some of the stuff you were doing. It's fascinating because you work in the area of Pinterest marketing, and Pinterest for me and for Will, we saw Pinterest, 8-9 years ago, and it was we're in the UK, you're in Canada, and it was basically a predominantly female platform, and it was quite big on the e-commerce side of things because people used to upload their entire catalog into Pinterest, and then you'd get a load of backlinks and you get your graphics and all pinned up there, and that was sort of 7 or 8 years ago, and people at work, we've got a team of 30 at Prohibition, and I'd say 80-90% of them are female. A lot of them use Pinterest.
Right.
You ask Will, not so much, but the girls are using Pinterest.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you use Pinterest in 2024, and how do you think it's changed over the last sort of 8 or 9 years?
Yeah.
And why should people be using it? I know there's a lot of questions in there, but
loaded with actual wonderful observations. So I've been doing this 10 years. So and I actually just celebrated my anniversary of when I first got invited to join Pinterest as a beta user. And actually, in a small connect, I was living in Belfast, Northern Ireland. As a Canadian, had a lot of extra time. And I joined Pinterest because I loved what it had to offer. It was a little bit different. But you're right. It used to be what we used to call the land of the Midwestern American mother, like middle-aged women. And so much has changed. In particular, you mentioned the last 8 years. I actually think in the last 3 years, as a Pinterest marketer who's watching what's happening, who's seen the ebbs and flows, we have seen the demographic really shift. And the biggest shift is that much younger people are gravitating towards Pinterest. It's the fastest growing demographic joining Pinterest. And from what I understand is they like the quote unquote vibes, the aesthetic. They love going somewhere where there's no drama. They don't have to talk to anyone. They can get lost in, ideas and inspiration. And it's interesting because we've seen some people say, oh, Pinterest feels so different. In some ways, I think that younger demographics are bringing it back to its roots as a place to source that next step of your life, that next thing that you're planning. We have seen, in terms of who's using Pinterest, overall, a downward sort of younger folk. We still see the largest group of people are the buying power, middle-aged women who like to plan things, whether it's a home reno, whether it's starting a side hustle, or potentially maybe welcoming another child, getting a puppy. Pinterest is that place where they go to curate resources, ideas, tutorials, how-tos. And as a business owner, I don't think there's been a better time. I think that it's reached its age of maturity. We understand how the technology works. And it's just this beautiful sort of renaissance where people are going back to like what I would call like what social media was when it first started 8 years ago.
So for anyone that doesn't or isn't that familiar with Pinterest, do you want to talk us through the kind of user experience and how it kind of
Absolutely.
differs from some of those more familiar social networks?
So, the way that it's different, and I think that just to sort of paint a picture, I always think back to like, why did I get on Pinterest? And I was, of that demographic where we used to save images onto our laptops or onto our computers and put them in a folder. If you were planning to go shopping, if you were planning a trip, we didn't really have a way. We would bookmark, right? How many bookmarks would you have? Like hundreds of bookmarks if you were planning a big trip with friends or and what Pinterest offered was this place to collect things from our travels online in one place. So as a user, you can go anywhere on the internet, in even on apps, and you can save things that for different reasons resonate with you, whether it's a look, a fashion look you like, a makeup look you want to try, a home reno, or actually, I always like to, my husband, my partner, who is also my business partner, he never used Pinterest. And when our son was about 1 year old, he was like, I'm just going to go hang out on Pinterest. It's your full-time work. And he turned to me and he's like, this is amazing. Like I found sensory activities. I found things I can do with him that will be good for his language. There's ideas about like a project. We could build something outside. And he just was literally becoming like a regular person using Pinterest. So Pinterest allows you to collect images and videos, save it to your account. You can create these things we call boards. And on those boards, you could call it like trip to Italy. And you can source different types of information, whether it's travel guides, you could do, or even just people who live in those places. You could save TikTok videos so that you have a place to collect your ideas. So it allows you, it's not so social. I like to say the unsocial social. You don't have to necessarily, there's not a lot of DMing. There's not a lot of talking to people in the comments. It's this peaceful place where you can collect ideas.
So with that then, if you're a marketer and you're working for an e-commerce brand, I don't know, that sells spectacles, for instance, or something like that, an online glasses retailer, what's the benefits of being on Pinterest? How would you use it if you were in the
Yeah.
market?
So it's a great question. So really, it's funny because I find that e-commerce, although, you suggested maybe it depends on your experience, right? Like I've seen e-commerce slow to adapt to Pinterest because often it's very product focused. Pinterest
Yeah.
tends to really thrive and drive a lot of website traffic, a lot of sales when you are more content focused or lifestyle focused in your brand approach. So sometimes we see that e-commerce struggle with that. It's like, here's the glasses, buy the glasses. And so that might not be always the best fit for Pinterest. But if I was, consulting or had a client that owned a spectacle company, the way that you can use it, it's now really moved towards becoming an active marketplace. So not only are you sourcing, different maybe glass styles that you're interested in, but you can save product pins. So as an e-commerce brand, you can upload your catalog and it can live on the platform as a product link, but it's also a wonderful place to sort of meet your customers where they're at, answer the frequently asked questions. How do I take care of my glasses? How do I know when I need to change the prescription? What should I do if they break? All those types of questions that come up during the customer journey. Pinterest is that place where people are heading to look for that information. And the biggest thing to understand as a business owner is that it is a visual search engine. So the same way that you might go to Google and type in, where's the best places to buy affordable spectacles or glasses, people would head to Pinterest thinking, well, what are the trending glass styles? I haven't got new glasses in 5 years. Or maybe they're looking for how to find glasses or spectacles that are flattering to my face shape. There's sort of more in-depth visual based questions. So Pinterest as a search engine allows you to make decisions not only using keywords, but also using your eyes. So for anything that's highly visual, it's just a beautiful place. And I want to mention for those that maybe, aren't in this mode of understanding or thinking about it, that as a search engine, why I have always gravitated towards it and the students and the clients that I support is because as a search engine, it will deliver up your products, your services, your content, your blog posts, whatever it might be, to people who have the intent to find it. So it pairs your relevant product to somebody who's looking for it. So that is like a beautiful thing, right? The search intent is there. And you're saying, oh, you're looking for modern cat eye spectacles? Here you go. Here's some blog posts on it. Here is a fashion influencer who's showing us different looks. Here are several companies that sell cat eye frames. And you can save that and then make that part of the buying decision when you go to buy your glasses.
What paid strategies are there then? So, like, because if you're a brand, like you've just said, you can use it for like the lifestyle-y stuff. What? Because there was promoted pins, right? And they've added more features, haven't they?
They have. They're really trying to scale that aspect of the business. Obviously, like most social media, like they have as a free platform, they have to drive growth and revenue from something. So Pinterest ads are wonderful. They are a very different beast compared to Meta ads or Google ads. I feel like it's just a lot younger, like it's just not as robust. That said, I have seen highly, highly successful, large scale ad campaigns. But when it works best, in my opinion, as someone who's supported both organic and paid strategies for very big brands, small business owners, is when you have a strong understanding in the organic sense. I find that if you just come to Pinterest to run ads, sure, you'll drive a lot of traffic. Conversions are harder depending on your price point. Takes quite a long time to optimize ad campaigns, so people get nervous. If you're new to media buying, it can be a bit nervous to run an ad campaign for 3 weeks and only make one sale. We have been conditioned by Meta. You start running that campaign, you're making sales, you're cutting even, or even better, making a return within 1 to 2 weeks. But we don't see that same impulsivity on Pinterest. So it's a planning platform. So we do see direct conversions, a lot of assisted conversions coming from Pinterest, but you have to think about a search engine and the way that people use Pinterest. So from a user perspective, people are often pinning today to make a purchase in 3 months. Can paid advertising accelerate that? Of course. It's like petrol, right? Like we're dumping gasoline or petrol on it. But in my opinion, I see the best returns from when you have a solid organic strategy. You figure out what works for your company, for your brand, and then you leverage that so that when you head into your paid advertising, you have a foot up already, right? You already know what your people like organically on Pinterest. And that is the most successful campaigns that I see people running.
So I think it'd be good to dive into in a moment some of those organic strategies, because I'm sure people are listening to this and thinking, "Oh yeah, that sounds great."
Now what?
Yeah, exactly. Before we do that, you've worked with hundreds and hundreds of brands in this space. What are the top benefits then? The top commercial benefits, I suppose, for a brand being on Pinterest that you see? Yeah.
So what I see best when it comes to brands using Pinterest is it's best leveraged for visibility and brand awareness. It really is top of funnel. I think that some people come to Pinterest thinking, well, I got locked out of my Facebook ads account or Meta ads account, or we were trying to move away from Instagram, or we're not seeing the same return there. We're going to head to Pinterest, but it's apples and oranges. It is really quite different. So as top of funnel, it's wonderful for discovery. It's wonderful for brand awareness and people discovering you, but you really need to bring them into your funnel, bring them into your world, and nurture them in different ways. So the way that I see when I work very closely with larger corporate companies, oftentimes it's part of the eco-marketing system. So they already have a really well-established or robust strategy to Instagram. They're running remarketing ads. They have all their other audiences dialed in. And now it's just about the numbers, right? It's just about growing. And so oftentimes their Pinterest audience is very different. So they can quickly double, triple. I worked with a brand We did our consult in December, and by February, they had gone from about 6 million views in terms of visibility and brand awareness on Pinterest to 23 million. So you can imagine, like that's a significant amount of growth. And with that follows then people who are engaging with their content, following them and making purchases. So it just tends to be a very different world in that way. The companies that excel are invested in their content marketing. They're invested in creating content that's catered to meet their customer needs. So companies that often flop on Pinterest, it's because they just try to take what they created for Instagram and they're throwing it up on Pinterest and kind of walking away from it. The companies that thrive and excel in the Pinterest space are dedicated, oftentimes heavily invested in their SEO, understand that it's a longer burn. So it's like, SEO for your website, that we're not likely to see a return overnight or even within 30 days. The real magic comes 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road. And so the brands that are really loving it there, I think, they're really focused on just bringing people into their ecosystem, and all roads eventually lead to their website. Signing up for their email list and becoming a very loyal, obsessed customer, but tend to have, really strong lifestyle-based content, are regularly creating content that considers their customer and trends that are happening. So in the last 12 months, we've really seen Pinterest trends emerge as this thing that sets brands apart. So when you can consider your customer on Pinterest, your products and your services, or the content you're creating, and then think about how you can leverage something that's trending on Pinterest, it's like gangbusters. It is like, instead of having these ebbs and flows of seasons or depending on the type of content you create, what we're seeing is it's sort of like you're positioning yourself like, hey, we see that, like metallic makeup was on an upward climb, and a client created something relevant to that. And it was just like, they already had the content. They just reshaped it, repurposed it, and kind of adjusted the copy for this upward seasonal or upward trending topic. And it was like within like 2 weeks, like 10 million views, tons of saves. So that's something very special to Pinterest. We talk about pinning content, and what that is basically called is saving a piece of content. And so Pinterest becomes this barometer or temperature check to understand the health of your content. If people aren't saving your content as a brand, it's not valuable. And your content has to be valuable. So that's why sometimes when we see brands who come to Pinterest, and it's sort of like they're just dipping their toe in, but they're not really putting any effort into it. They're just throwing their products up and, saying a prayer. What we see is like, sure, some people will save a product shot, but what they're really looking for is a little bit more value. You're giving them a reason to want to refer back. And that's what Pinterest is all about. And it's always been that. So Pinterest has always been this concept of collecting and saving ideas. And we now see saves on Instagram, saves on TikTok, a great indicator of if your content is going to go viral. And it sends social signals, right? Like now we're seeing that come out with the news from Google, the Google updates, that social signals are more important than ever. And Pinterest has always been that. So it becomes this super complementary channel to people or brands that are already investing in their content. So
what are the biggest mistakes you see brands making then? Just dipping straight in?
Yeah, well, not necessarily. Like the biggest offenders is that they often will just have their intern or social media manager take what they created for Instagram and slap it up on Pinterest and not adjust the copy. So pinners use different words to search. The search intent is different. So I actually just was talking about this somewhere, but it was about how someone said, I really understand Pinterest keywords, and I've been doing it for 3 months and I have no return. It was an Etsy shop owner. And I said, well, why don't you send me your account? So I had a little peek. It was just her Etsy SEO. So she had done all her Etsy research, pulled it over to Pinterest, and was surprised when it didn't work. And I see brands often pulling like, yeah, just take our Instagram post and put it up. But you need to adjust the copy so it's discoverable. The concept is it's a search engine. So do that little bit of extra research. I'm not talking 3 hours of research. I'm talking 30 seconds, 1 minute to extra keyword research, optimize it for the platform. I also think some of the biggest mistakes is that they sort of try to automate it without ever checking in on it. So I see people just sending over a single pin a day. Pinterest is, as a search engine, it becomes like the more you feed it, the better. And so if you can, and if you really think about all the touch points, most brands are creating something for TikTok, something for Facebook, something for their email newsletter, something's going out on LinkedIn. That's a lot of content that you can repurpose to Pinterest. So really, not taking the extra time. And then I've seen brands like they show up, they create one board, they promote a pin, and they walk away. And that's, to me, that's just a missed opportunity.
How did you get into this? How did you get into Pinterest? How did you suddenly decide, I know, it's Pinterest?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Why Pinterest and why not? There's a million social networks, isn't there?
There really is.
What is it about Pinterest that grabbed you?
Without getting into my life story, I moved to Belfast in 2010. I worked as an educational psychologist. I got qualified as an educational psychologist, recognized by the UK governing body, but nobody would give me a job. And I am a busy bee worker horse, like I'm always just doing things. So I decided to start blogging because I had always read blogs myself. It was a hobby. My ex's mother was the only person that read it. And part of that was I taught myself, honestly, she would let me know when I had a typo, like with love. So I taught myself how to custom code a WordPress website. Because I was bored, right? Like it was kind of like, how do I do this? I have all this. I went from being a well-established school psychologist who, in Canada with a big friend network to no friends, no job, nobody would even interview me, and it was lonely. So I created this website, I created this blog, I started talking about what I was doing, some of my journeys. And so I started kind of looking at, like, you started back in that day in 2010, you started a blog, all your content lived on your website, and then social media started to come out and you started to realize, well, if I want people to find my blog content, I've got to make sure that it goes on Facebook. Instagram wasn't around yet, and Pinterest was relatively new and it solved a problem that I wanted. I saw an influencer that I really liked out of LA. She shared that she was on it. I think she shared it on Twitter. And I was like, oh, I really like this idea that instead of saving all these images to my computer and clogging up all my memory, slowing my laptop down, I could join this platform and save all the images for my own projects. Well, 6 months later, I went viral. Somebody posted one of my projects. To this day, one of the biggest Pinterest users in the world pinned one of my DIY projects. So I went from getting about 300 to 500 visitors a day to my blog to 15,000 in less than a 24-hour time period. And with that came exponential growth as an influencer in a social media, in social media channels. And so I started getting brand gigs and influencer deals, and I grew to over 100,000 followers. And this was something I just did for fun. And with that, when I started doing sponsored work with brands, they would say, we notice you have a massive presence on Pinterest. Nobody's talking about Pinterest for brands. Nobody on our team knows what to do. Do you think you could come to an in-house training session? Do you think you could create strategy? And you know where this is going, right? I went to school for way too long to be a psychologist, to all of a sudden, people throwing money at me to do private consulting because nobody was doing it. And so I started doing consulting on the side. I still worked full-time as a psychologist. And the rest was sort of history. It was just purely out of demand. I didn't have a website. I was using a Gmail, account that people would email me. And a few years later, I got a huge, massive, one of the number one bridal companies in the world. The CEO emailed me, said I Googled Pinterest consultant, found you. 2 days later, I was pushing my baby in a pram in a laneway, did the call with a headset, and booked him as a client, and I haven't looked back.
Wow, that's
And are you one of the
amazing story.
are you one of the few consultants that works directly with Pinterest then? I read on your
Yeah,
website. Is that
so
right?
I, through a risky move that I took a few years ago, introduced myself to the president of Pinterest Canada. They were hosting an event here in Toronto. This will, not to dismiss younger folks, but I was at an event where a lot of interns were sent, or younger and junior employees on the marketing teams from brands, and nobody knew who she was. But I had looked her up on LinkedIn, and I thought, there's Erin. She's not talking to anybody. So I walked up, introduced myself. And ever since then, I have been a friend to people within the Pinterest teams. So they share information with me, they invite me to events. And then part of that is they also said to me that they really wanted somebody to come in and facilitate teaching and workshops. And, it's a huge honor that, as far as I know currently, I'm one of the only Pinterest marketing external non-Pinterest employees that they bring in to facilitate workshops and teachings to different teams there. And yeah, I love it. It's wonderful for me too, right? Because it's a huge learning opportunity to see how the different teams work, to marry my knowledge, sort of unbiased knowledge, that what I can take. And then obviously, I hosted a virtual event in February, and a Pinterest employee came and gave an in-depth interview. And so those relationships have really helped me to, to really, pull out in my little niche that I have here in the marketing world.
How often should we be pinning then on Pinterest? Because you've given loads of examples there,
Yeah.
and because I think I've pinned about 4,000 pins, and from years ago, and I've still got, so can't remember how many followers. I haven't
Yeah,
checked
it's
my
humming
account for
away, I
ages.
bet. Well, that's just it. It's like a snowball, right? Like, it's this thing that just keeps going for you, even though you're not there. And actually, that's probably why, as someone in the social media marketing space, I've never, even if there's been ups and downs like there is with any platform, I have always personally, myself and my clients, really benefited from a channel like Pinterest, because I had a client who's very sadly, her husband was diagnosed with cancer. She had to walk away from her business for 6 months. She still gained email subscribers, purchases every single day, website traffic from her efforts on Pinterest and me supporting her. And so, and I have 2 young children. I've gone through different seasons of life where I'm more or less present in my marketing, and search engines like Pinterest and Google have always been my best friend. And that's sort of just how I've always been my whole life. Even like when I was doing blogging and influencer work, I drove across Canada. I didn't even have service sometimes, so things like Pinterest have always worked for me. When people start to ask questions like, how many pins should I add a day? I ask, like, well, how much do you want to grow? And then what can your content marketing sustain? Pinterest doesn't want you just to share the same thing over and over again. We wouldn't do that on TikTok. We wouldn't do it on Instagram. Can you imagine if you went to a brand's Instagram feed and they just shared the same image with the same caption? No, but people do think you can do that to Pinterest. I don't know why. It results in an awful experience. But a Pinterest account, whether you are a brand or a small business owner, it doesn't really matter who or what you are, but if you're using it as a business user, it thrives. The more you add to it, the better, but consistency is key. So it takes about 3 weeks, just from like a technical perspective. Each and every person's account has its own cadence and definition of consistency. So it takes 3 weeks for the algorithm to learn what you can sustain. So if it's 1 a day, add 1 a day. If it's 2 a day, add 2 a day. Sometimes there's like old advice, you have to do 15 pins a day, you have to do 20. You don't, but whatever you do it consistently. So if it's like 2 pins on Monday, 2 pins on Wednesday, and 2 on Saturday, great. Keep that up for 3 weeks, and Pinterest will learn that that's the cadence, or that's the what you're going to sustain on that account. But really, it's the type of thing that I think, start with like a modest amount, like 1 a day. Focus on dripping out and sharing high quality content. And once you start to see the return, you're going to want to double down. Like I did, again, the consult I did in December, they were doing 3 pins a day. And, they were sitting at 8 million. And I said, well, what are your goals? Let's look at your business goals. What are your projections? Okay. What type of content? They weren't even sharing all the content that they had. There are so many potential content vehicles. You can share podcast episodes. You can share webinar sign-up pages. You can share FAQ pages. You can share product collection pages. You can share, there's so many different things. Instagram posts, TikTok posts. You could grow your Instagram account. You could grow your TikTok account. You could drive traffic to your YouTube. You can drive traffic to your, email sign-up page. There's so many different content vehicles available for business owners. And oftentimes when I look at accounts, they're only really pinning some old blog content or one video here or there. Pinterest loves video. Pinterest loves fresh links or fresh content that's high value. So start out with 1 or 2 a day. And then, like I said, this brand I work with, they went from about 3 a day up to 10. And they went from 8 million to 23 million views. And yes, don't worry, they had 100% growth in traffic. Their sales tripled from the platform.
That sounds like if you're a content marketer sat there going, oh, I've got a blog full of we've got a blog, the Prohibition blog it's got like 800, 900 articles on it. I bet we've pinned about 30 of them. If somebody went through and pinned them all and optimized them all. First question actually is on the technical side of optimize. You talked about Pinterest sounds like it because it's a search engine. It's got its own sort of SEO. So yes. How you said that it's different to like a caption on Instagram. So how long does a description have to be on Pinterest to make it work beautifully for its own search engine optimization?
Well, like many search engines, you really want to write for humans, but maximize your keywords and your relevant keywords. Yeah. So you're using your Pinterest copy. So unlike Instagram, on Pinterest, you have what we call pin title. So that's the heading that appears below your image or your video. This is one of the most important places to use your keywords. Oftentimes we've been conditioned because it's a visual search engine that we use text on screen. That text on screen is actually read by the Pinterest crawler. So it scans images and it scans your video covers to understand what I'm looking at. So don't forget to add text so that you're not confusing the bots, right? The machine learning. Then you have your pin description. And this would be similar to a caption in that it's where you provide more copy. But again, whereas on Instagram, you might have some like a hook and a cute little description, emojis, and then 20 hashtags. On Pinterest, we're really going to write that pin description to be keyword rich, to include relevant broad terms so that Pinterest understands what it's looking at. It's constantly trying to figure out through machine learning, what is this pin about and who is this relevant to? So it's important to use, terms like business owners, brands, with your 800 blog posts. And here's the thing, Chris, it's not just 800 pins that you could be sharing and dripping out to Pinterest. You can actually create 5 images, 10 images per blog post and drip those out. So this is potentially like 8,000 pins. Then if you have any video content, so if you're pushing out reels, if you're creating YouTube shorts or YouTube videos, longer ones that you could grab snippets from, if you have the podcast, every podcast episode could be going up there. The thing is that we sometimes think well, Pinterest is just like recipes and baby shower planning and nails. Yes, those are huge verticals on Pinterest. But the thing is that especially in the business space or in particular niches or industries, your competitor is not using Pinterest. And you can go into the Pinterest ads manager, set up a fake campaign, and actually look at what the search volume is for particular terms. So it might be, how to start a business has between 500,000 and 1 million searches a month on Pinterest alone. So if you have content about that, your competitors most likely aren't on Pinterest. And I think especially you started this interview by chatting about we have these assumptions that it's mostly women. First off, we know that middle-aged women have the biggest buying power, right? We know that in a household. I'm not trying to say anything against that, but we know that. But it's sort of a lot of men who work in marketing roles are say, well, I'm not on Pinterest, so we're not going to put our company on Pinterest. And it's actually, like, I get it. It's a smaller pond, right? It's not necessarily the type of traffic you would see from SEO efforts, or it's not necessarily that you're going to go viral overnight. But if you're creating content for other channels, it's a no-brainer that you would want to move into a platform that isn't being utilized by your competitors, and that people are there and thirsty for it.
Is there on that, actually, that's an interesting point. Is there some underserved sectors where there is a massive opportunity? You mentioned businesses, for example.
Yeah. So we're seeing
generic term.
Good question. I'll be completely honest with you. From off the top of my head, I don't have anything in particular. I do think like education in terms of business, and we're seeing an uptick in that across, thanks to the digital marketing, pyramid schemes that have exploded into social media and marketing. I think that there isn't as much people who, what I would call, are infopreneur based. So I even had somebody reach out to me last week and they're like, well, Pinterest is really only for visual business owners, like photographers. And I was like, excuse me? No, absolutely not. It's actually about your content. I think any business could thrive on Pinterest. It's actually defined by what your content marketing approach is. So if you are publishing content, if you are creating video, then you should be on Pinterest. I do think that we're going to see, again, like, let's look at what the younger generations are doing, because that's the fastest growing demographic on Pinterest. We are seeing more men use it. We are seeing, also, there was like a lot of news articles about how young dads were starting to use Pinterest because they want to be, well, I don't want to say anything to say, like, they want to be better dads. They want to have ideas for how maybe not to repeat mistakes that were made in previous generations. I'm trying to say that in a nice way, right? I think that what we're seeing is that a lot of business owners aren't thriving in the places they used to thrive. They feel like they're in this content churn that's not having a lot of return. So they're going back to basics and saying, okay, what has that return on investment for us? How can we do more with what we have, especially for brands that are leaning into evergreen content? Pinterest is just like, it loves content from 3 years ago, right? We're like in this very strange world where some people are still thinking like, I have to create a reel and go viral this week. And it's like, it goes viral and then no one sees it again for, ages, unless you republish it somewhere. Whereas Pinterest is like, give me that blog post from 2 years ago, give me that podcast episode from 5 years ago. And as long as it's good and, evergreen content, even not evergreen content, still goes viral. You see people looking up travel guides for Portugal and it might say 2019 on it, but it's still really valuable, right? And so people are still consuming that content, even when it might feel, that it says on it for best places to go in 2019.
So, Megan, do people hire you then to obviously do the strategy, right? The strategy for Pinterest. But so let's use an example that, like, similar to ours, where we've got, say, 900 blog articles on there. Would they hire you to then come in, analyze the 900 blog posts, and then, like you said, it's not just the blog itself; it's the 8 pictures that's on, 5 or 6 pictures that's on per blog. Do you then implement that, or do you give someone a framework for?
Yeah, I focus more on the strategy piece. So I get brought in on very large teams that just don't have the knowledge base to know what to do with it. They know there's an opportunity. They've seen the potential, whether it's with their existing account and they have very little strategy, or they've been reading and they're very interested in moving on to Pinterest. And so they'll bring me in. I do an audit and a baseline review, and then I create customized strategies to say, okay, team, this is what you're going to do. This is what it's going to look like. And then we have ongoing consults as they scale their efforts. I've really moved into the education piece and to, one-to-many model. I used to run a Pinterest marketing agency. So I managed between 40 and 50 accounts in a month with my team. Loved it. fell out of love with managing people like many. I found I was in meetings all day and I was sending emails all day to my team members. And so I really started moving towards being sharing via education and being brought in to speak and selling digital products. And then I do a little bit of here and there one-off consulting for brands. And that's really what I do nowadays. I do mentor and train and vet Pinterest managers though, because I get emails every single day. Hey, Megan, do you know anyone that can do this? Or we need a Pinterest manager. We just want to outsource it. And as I figured out very quickly when I was running my own agency, is that a lot of people will think that Pinterest is very simple, but they're not actually bringing critical they're not really thinking about how do we actually change what we're doing. And, there are people you can hire and yes, they'll take your content, throw it up on Pinterest, but they don't understand the algorithm. They don't understand keyword strategy. And they also can't bring in that piece of, this is what a small business owner or a blogger would do. The way that you show up as a brand or a well-established entrepreneur on Pinterest is very different. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the ability to step back. Actually, this is where my background. So I say I was a psychologist for 10 years. And sometimes I joke well, I'm glad that I spent $120,000 becoming a psychologist to work in marketing and not have any degrees in that. But actually, I used to do what we call educational assessment. Well, you call them in the UK educational assessments or psychological assessments here for the biggest school board in North America. So what I do is I would look at what children were really good at, what was difficult for them. I'd come up with a customized learning plan for that particular child. And so I bring that ability to sort of very quickly do a meta-analysis, analyze what's going on in the industry, what's happening with their content marketing. And because I have a background, I started as a blogger and I did influencer work, creating content for brands. I move in those spaces very easily because I used to be in those rooms. I remember. And so for me, it's sort of, that's what sets me apart why I get hired by household brands, because I understand that sort of beast is very different than, say, a blogger who blogs about, gluten-free recipes or raising puppies. And those people are wonderful too. And I love working with them, but understanding the content marketing, ad budgets, remarketing, and bringing it all together, that is my happy place. I love that higher level strategy and then helping teams execute in-house through my guidance.
So this show is all about marketing mistakes. So Megan, you've got your background in psychology is making me feel really judged.
No, listen, when people used to ask me, especially men, this was a common thing. Do you know what I'm thinking? I just remembered that the other day, and nobody has said that to me in a really long time. Listen, I have 2 small children. I'm not worrying about what you're thinking or what you're judging you.
No, I'm joking. So our show is all about marketing mistakes and what you learn. So have you had any big mistakes that you've made in marketing that you've learned that we can all learn from? What's one of your biggest mistakes you've made?
For me personally, in my own business, I would say that, and I've talked about this before, but it's sort of I don't think I fully have told people why. So I made a huge financial mistake, but it was also I lost $25,000 early on in my business hiring a Facebook ads expert. I'll do air quotes around the word expert. And we ran ads to a brand new funnel that we had never tested, that had not been tested organically. So from a coaching perspective, but also about my own business, I think it was really embarrassing for me because I think I know a lot and I generally make risky decisions that are safe. I am the sole breadwinner in our family. So my husband works for me, but he is the caregiver of our small children. I'm the ambitious one. I love working. And I losing $25,000 in 3 months, thankfully I was in a position I didn't, it's not like I couldn't afford to pay our mortgage, or we didn't lose anything, but I was licking my wounds after that. And I realized like the biggest thing I learned was like, don't run paid advertising to a funnel you haven't tested organically. Do not outsource something until you have enough understanding of it to ask the right questions. There were warning flags. My husband and I both picked up on them, but we kept thinking, well, they charge so much. Like clearly when you're paying someone thousands of dollars a month to manage ads, they clearly must know what they're doing. And that person did not know what they were doing, and it was an expensive mistake.
So you're saying you basically burnt the budget?
Yeah.
It didn't get any results for you, and you just spent 25 grand in 3 months and realized
that's right.
This is achieving nothing.
Yeah, we were spending about like $7,000 to $10,000 a month on the ad spend, USD. We were paying the person between $2,500 and $3,000 USD a month. And we did get some like freebie opt-ins. One person purchased. So during that 90-day period, one person bought my offer. It was only $67. What
kind of return on investment is that?
Wait. It gets better. So
you have the ROAS.
The person that purchased emailed me and said, I just had a baby 4 days ago. I should not have spent the money. I'm so sorry to do this. I'm asking for a refund. Can you cancel? And honestly, I think I laughed until I cried. And I thought, so we had one purchase in the 90-day time period. They asked for a refund after 4 days because they had just literally, she got out of the hospital and asked for the refund. And, it was, but now I run my own Facebook ads. I've learned a lot. Now when I hire, my husband and I, we have a lot of questions we ask. We love outsourcing and hiring, but we scrutinize. I took this person as a referral. I thought if my friends are doing well with them, well, I love some of my friends, but they don't know as much as my husband and I do about conversions, events, about ad spend. So anyways, that definitely led to some major trust issues.
I'm not surprised. But you're still standing. You survived it.
I did. And now it's I always do things myself first, learn enough to be dangerous. And then I look to outsource. So even I started running TikTok ads for my own business. And, I never spend money I don't have. And that's the way thankfully I can look at it. But would I have liked to have done different things with that $25,000? Absolutely. But now I do feel like I learned a lot, and it helps me to teach, because I have a lot of business owners who come to me and they'll say like, oh, I want to start running ads. And they haven't proven their funnel yet. It's made me a better marketer. That's for sure.
That's the right way to take it.
That's a good silver lining. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, use it as from every mistake there is a positive.
Yes,
I think
always.
We've all lost money though, haven't we? I mean, everybody's lost money. It's the nature of the beast in marketing, test and measure. But maybe you just didn't measure it quick enough. That 90 days maybe should have been 30 or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, lessons learned. It's okay. It also made me just like with running ads, it's always, you just have to know, especially when you're not physical product, right? And so much has changed in the ad space. But I love that stuff now, and it helps me with my organic marketing efforts. So it's okay.
Would you say people have to be B2C to work in Pinterest then? Or, does it have to be business to consumer, or,
no.
Or does B2B work really well based
B2B,
on what you said?
Well, we kind of touched upon it earlier, right? The B2B is a little bit smaller in terms of the numbers, but those people are on Pinterest. Like like I said, like how to start a business, how to market my business, things that are education based, graphic design, branding. So all those, like that B2B area is quite big. And we do see, like, again, it just depends. Like, it's sort of comparing apples and oranges, but those people are on Pinterest. They're looking for resources and education, but it's just a little different, right? We know that those segments are a bit smaller, and that's true on Pinterest as well. What I would say is if you're very local, like you only work with people in, especially, I don't know if you know this, but the UK is a testing ground for Pinterest. So they often test new features, you get access to things. And Pinterest Canada and Pinterest UK are in the same team. And so they have like English speaking countries outside of America. And so you often get features before other people. But one thing that is sort of something to think about is if you only offer services as a B2B, or even if you sell physical products, but you only sell products in your country or even in your region, I would say Pinterest is not always a wonderful place for you, because it does tend to be the largest market is America, second largest is Canada, then UK and Australia. And so you just have to sort of consider that, like, what's my goal here? People finding me, people booking me, people purchasing my physical or digital products. You really just have to consider that when you're thinking about how much effort you're going to put into Pinterest.
Great. And if
Fantastic.
people want to get in contact with you, Megan, how can they find you?
Oh,
if they want to book you for your brilliant services?
Oh, thank you. All roads lead to my website and my email list. So the best place to reach out to me is via meganwilliamson.com. So you can just Google that, MEAGAN Williamson.com. That's my brand website. My company is actually called Pin Potential. That's all my digital products and services. But you can just look up my name and you can either join my email list and start learning for free. And I share, I'm very, very dedicated. All roads lead to my email list. But if you want to talk one-on-one, just shoot me an email and I reply to every email, usually within a few days.
Wow, and how can people find you on Pinterest then?
Yeah,
do they just, I mean, that's the obvious question for me.
You're not on it, are you?
Yeah. I should have deleted my account. So you can just look up Megan Williamson in my account. And actually, here's a funny, weird thing that because I started my account and I had over 100,000 followers under my blog name, which was row house nest. I used to live in a little row house when I was in Belfast, and that's where I started my blog. They won't let me change my handle to my name. So I'm a verified account as Megan Williamson, but my actual handle is row house nest, and they won't let me change it because I had over 100,000 followers. I know.
With your connections, well. You can't get it changed.
Yeah, they got me verified without even me asking. And I've tried to change my name a few times, but across social media, I'm Megan Williamson or Megan A. Williamson. So if you like video, TikTok, there's short, snappy tutorials there. I love Threads. Have you guys talked about Threads on the podcast yet?
We have touched on Threads. I might get a Threads expert on the show.
Is there such a thing? I don't think anyone is one.
No, it's just everybody bullshitting.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just bullshit. It's unhinged bullshit, and it's working for me. It's like, I love Threads.
I'm finding Threads to be the Twitter... The old, it's like not X is now X. It's not Twitter, is it? And everybody that's moved to, once you get over the Threads all being about people that have left Twitter, because that's all what people. But the other stuff's actually quite useful, and it feels like what Twitter used to be a little bit.
It's really, I think, injected some new life into social media, and it's interesting because it's connected, right? So I just saw an announcement that they're going to be rolling out ads on Threads in the fall, which, as a marketer, I like. As a person who loves Threads, I don't like the idea of being interrupted, but I think it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve. I think people are looking for peaceful. We're kind of like tired. We are tired. And so people are looking for places like Pinterest and Threads. I think it's why TikTok has brought out Notes, like places that feel less visually or even just less stimulating in general. And so I think that all these big social media giants are kind of looking for a place or a part of their business that is less stimulating, as people say, hey, I'm really overstimulated, but I want to go on social media, but I don't want to be bombarded by reels, dancing and singing.
Okay.
Now, a question we always ask our guests, Megan, if you were us and you could invite somebody onto our podcast as our next guest, who would you invite?
I would invite, so there's a few people. My friend Iman is an email marketer. She's from the UK, but lives in Norway. She's the best copywriter I've ever hired. Worth every penny. She is phenomenal. So if you're looking for someone in that space, or one of my favorite people to listen to right now in the podcast space is a creator coach called Jay Klaus. I think that Jay Klaus is very thoughtful. Actually, I just jokingly said yesterday that also Jay and Iman should talk. Jay, yeah, he has a lot of really interesting ideas. I love the way he synthesizes ideas, and he represents a lot of people who want to become creators and thought leaders online, influencer related. So I think you guys would really like him. And Iman,
Fantastic.
I think you would love her because she's a fantastic copywriter, just like the best. And hardly anyone knows about her, which is kind of shocking to me. And I've hired a lot of copywriters. Copywriting is I think one of the most difficult things in the marketing space.
One of the most underrated things as well. People just seem to think it's easy, and it's bloody not.
Gosh.
Copyright.
Yeah. And it's difficult to outsource, right? It's like that thing that you want off your plate, but then if you do it to the wrong person and they don't nail your brand voice or, she did magical things for me. I hired her to do a launch sequence for me, and she took all my reviews and testimonials, mapped it onto objections and pain points. It was mind-blowingly beautiful. So I'll send invites for both so you guys can meet. Jay, I don't know.
Yeah, fantastic.
But Iman, I'll send a person, introduce you. And yeah, I think you would love both.